Good morning everyone and welcome to our 10th EOA Better Together webinar. You're all very welcome again. For those of you who are new to the webinar, just a few housekeeping arrangements. If you have any technical problems and need some support, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a chat function. My colleague Ollie Smith is available to deal with any technical issues, so please just let us know on that chat function. Throughout the webinar this morning, there'll be lots of opportunity for you to ask questions or just to offer comments. And if you use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, then I'll be able to see that, as will our other guests this morning. So please do share your thoughts on what you hear or any specific questions that you'd like us to raise. And as usual, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to download this both as a webinar and as a podcast afterwards, and share it with any colleagues who maybe weren't able to attend this morning. So I guess just a few reflections on where we've been at the end of week 10 of lockdown, which is what we're approaching now. So over the last 10 weeks, most of us have been through the same experience of having to react quite quickly and then respond to the emerging crisis. And over that period, most of us will have learned new things about ourselves, and certainly we will have adapted the way we work. We know, for example, that at least a quarter of businesses have either temporarily paused operations or closed completely during this period. We know that about 50% of UK workers are now working from home, so we've learned and needed to adapt new skills around digital and these types of scenarios that we're using this morning. And we also know, sadly, that between a third and a fifth of workers have had to access the furlough scheme. So it's been a really strange period for all of us, but I think now what we're starting to see and hear is a change in narrative, as we start to think about how do we re-stimulate supply and demand in the market. And certainly tonight, I think we're all expecting to hear from the Prime Minister announcements about some relaxation of some of the lockdown rules. And like me, you will have read about schools reopening next week for certain school years, certain types of retail opening from next Monday, I think car showrooms and garden centres, and then in a couple of weeks after that, more broadly, non-food retailing opening as well. So we are slowly but surely resuming back into some sort of new normal for both work and our social lives, all predicated, of course, on that contingency of keeping the R level, the infection rate, below 1, which is why yesterday's announcement of this test and trace strategy by the government is so important. And I think there's going to be a call out this week and tonight probably from the Prime Minister for us all to take our civic responsibilities really seriously when it comes to that. So where we are now in terms of the country and each of us and our businesses and our working lives and our social lives, it feels completely apt that our conversation this morning is going to be centred on the return to work. And I'm absolutely delighted that we've got two speakers who are going to bring complementary but different experiences to bear on this conversation this morning. One looking at it from the perspective of the operational, the health and safety issues of how do you make workplaces COVID secure and how do you ensure that that can be maintained for the long term, not just the short term, and combined with the psychological aspects of returning to work, where many employee owners and employees will be feeling quite nervous, possibly quite anxious. So I'm absolutely delighted we've got two brilliant speakers, and our first speaker this morning is Shaun Imrie. Shaun is the Group Head of Operations and Compliance at EOA member Shawston International. You're very welcome this morning, Shaun. I hope you're feeling well and bright and breezy, even though it looks a bit dark in your room behind you this morning.
Yeah, a little bit dark, but some bright news, Deb,
Good.
that we're going to speak about. So hopefully that'll bring some light to the conversation.
Good. I'll hand over to you now, Shaun. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Good morning, everybody. Absolute pleasure to be talking to you on behalf of Shawston International and also supporting our members in the Employee Ownership Association. Before going to what I'd like to speak to you about, I thought it would be worth just giving you a little bit of context around Shawston and what we do, and hopefully you'll be able to relate to where we are now, but also perhaps some of the challenges that you've got in your own businesses. And as I go through any of the points that I may raise or the documents that I mention, I'm more than available to our members to just reach out, and I will supply whatever you need and answer any further questions either during or after this if you think anything's going to be of a help. So Shawston International have 120 employees. We are the market leader of the fire industry for supplying fittings, tube, and also to the mechanical industry as well. We operate out of 5 depots across the UK, a fleet of 25 vehicles, and our challenges have been somewhat over the past 9-10 weeks, and I want to be able to share some of them challenges with you, but also the opportunity as well. We've been going for 20 years, but the last 5 of those have been employee owned, and like many of you, you might be wondering where is the opportunity to really strike while the iron is hot when we talk about having true employee ownership. And I hope that being work ready in the recovery process, you can actually see what we've done, perhaps take some examples or tips from that that we can share and all learn from. Ollie, if you wouldn't mind opening my first slide, please. So what you see in front of you on the screen is a basic model that we have adopted at Shawston. And I thought it was definitely worth sharing this model with you, because who's to say that we won't come back to this place again? Who's to say that we won't have another pandemic? Who's to say that something else won't strike in our business, which is going to cause us serious disruption? And our insurance or other legal entities might be asking us to have a contingency plan in place in the future. And it might be a condition of, say, insurance or other legalities. So it's definitely worth looking at model and having this as a backup. Plus, we don't know if this virus is going to strike again, and we might need to follow this circle as we go through. For those on podcast, I'm just going to relay what I'm seeing on the screen at the moment, and also just very briefly describe before I go into the slides. So we see the pandemic at the top, which is obviously what hit us in February. And then we established a COBRA team, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We then forced into a survival mode very quickly. But this is where we've seen a great opportunity as an employee-owned business, which is the really exciting part that I hope you all are going to enjoy listening about, and you might be able to relate or actually find your own opportunity, and it definitely isn't too late for that. The hard part, which we're in now, is the recovery, and that's all about being work ready. And what are we doing to make sure we're COVID secure, to make sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk, to our people, make sure they're not at risk, our business isn't at risk, whether that be financial, legally, or morally. So if you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide, please. So in the beginning, when this struck, we understood very quickly that we needed to get a grip on what was happening to our business, but also have a really strong, effective communication to every one of our employees and co-owners. So we established a COBRA team. Now, in the beginning, that seemed a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it very quickly grew a lot of confidence in all of our co-owners. We felt it was good enough for the Prime Minister. It was definitely good enough for our CEO, Rob Davenport, and our business. And it has been extremely effective. Essentially, we established 4 heads in that team. We had safety, finance, operations, and communication. The 4 pillars of making sure that our business and our people were going to survive through this. We met daily, we met hourly, and we had direct access to the figures, direct access to our vulnerable people, knowing where we had childcare issues, and being able to track and trace our employees and co-owners and really be effective with their needs. We had 2 goals, ultimately, to protect our business and our people. But there was one surprise opportunity which really stuck out, and we didn't expect it. And it was the rise of what we almost are looking at as Shawston Soul. And that was the way people acted when we were in that survival mode. And that's what I want to obviously talk to you about as well. Next slide, please, Ollie. So during survival, we quickly established that, well, if we're going to go COBRA, let's go military. Why not? We know it works. So we adopted the bikini alert states that are used in the British military. And that follows 5 key states: white, black special, amber, and red. In each of those, we accompanied with an action plan. And these are alert states that we can very quickly go back to. Now, each alert state represents perhaps what the virus is doing, whether it's affecting our people. It represents what the government might be doing, whether that be lockdown. But more importantly, it's protecting our people and our business, because each of those action plans that relate to each of those alert states focus on them 4 main areas: our finance, our operations, our safety, and ultimately our communication, which has been the most important part. And we have had an amazing communication team that's reached out to all of our people, whether that be through WhatsApp groups, through quizzes, or through a dedicated telephone number that one of our more senior directors has been checking on people once a week, and it's been very effective. So next slide, please, Ollie. The recovery is where it got tricky. The survival mode was, it's hard to say enjoyable, but there was an element of adrenaline pumping through everybody's veins, particularly on the Cobra team, but also everybody else that was trying to muck in and create something really special. And when I say that, that's where I'm talking about that opportunity I mentioned. So whilst in lockdown, we put most people on furlough, unfortunately, although we did pay them in full, we had a small amount of people operating in branches, our 5 branches across the UK. Now, what we quickly found was that people started to act in a completely different way. They started to show a mass amount of discretionary effort. They started to show unrivaled levels of leadership. They started to do things beyond what we would ever expect an employee or a co-owner to do. In fact, we stopped seeing employees. Employees went out the window and co-owners really stepped up. The data reflects this to some degree as well, to say that we can be far more efficient with less heads when people are working and acting and supporting and having a higher level of camaraderie and morale and really treating it like it's their own business, making decisions every day because they have to. And we wanted to figure out a way to capture that. And that's where the opportunity is. And again, I'm going to come on to that in a minute. So the recovery, as you will all be able to relate to, is a really hard time. There's so many moving parts, and we have people at home that might not be feeling safe. We have people at home maybe saying, well, now they can work from home, but we want them in the office for various reasons. You've got multiple challenges. It might be childcare. It might be vulnerable people. So we understand what everybody is going through. And it's so important to have that tracking document, which I can share, and also to have a clear line of communication with everybody on a regular basis. The Cobra transition to the senior leadership team to have more heads, to focus on supply chain, to focus on customer expectation, to focus on sales. And so that wider, broader scope needed to start to transact as normal. So the senior leadership now have taken control of the return to work. The strategy has been very important. And having an induction phase and return plans about who's going to come back in and when, based on their skill set, based on what they can offer the business, based on how they're going to fit into the working environment quickly and be able to deliver what we need to deliver, in line with the Shawston soul, which I've spoken about. So that Shawston soul needed to be captured. What have people been doing whilst at work when everybody's sat at home? Well, Deb and the EOA often talk about what is employee ownership? What does it look like? It's hard to put into words sometimes. This time we've been able to do it. We've been able to document and catalogue what ownership looks like. And we've brought that into an induction. It gives examples of what people have done in survival mode. It gives examples of discretionary effort. What is discretionary effort? Let's not use complicated language if we don't need to. There's been multiple examples that I would love to share with you, but obviously we're on a time restriction. But please get in touch, and I would love to share them with you, as many as I can. So we've captured that into an induction. So when people return to work, they see that. We're going to start signing people up to commitment cards, taking ownership for their own work areas, and the list goes on. So COVID security has been extremely important because people who didn't feel safe coming into work. Well, why would they? They've been trying so hard. And we talk about being supermarket safe, don't we? About, well, you need to go to a supermarket to put food on your table, but you also need to come into work to put food on your table as well. But why go to the supermarket? What, do you feel safe enough? Yes, you do, because of the controls that they have in place. But guess what? We've got more. We've done risk assessments because it's a legal requirement. It follows a basic health and safety model of Plan to Check Act. We plan via risk assessment. We do via putting those controls in place. In Shawston's case, we've developed 10 COVID commandments. Very prominent, very, very disciplined, and it needs to be. We've implemented 20 COVID-19 marshals. We have a workforce of 120 staff. That's a very high proportion. Those COVID-19 marshals are there to implement all of them COVID commandments and keep people safe. We then audit because we need to. That completes the model, but it also ties into the legalities. It's important to reflect and remember the new guidance that's been released from the HSE. Under the RIDOR regulations, reporting of injuries and dangerous occurrences, it's now a legal requirement to report any COVID-19 contraction, anybody who comes with the virus at your workplace. And if you have not been putting in the right levels of controls, you can be legally liable if it's proven that it's been contracted at your place of work. So very important to follow a model and have the resources and the controls in place. And they're all available on the government website as well. Again, happy to share any of those. So keep that tracking and support is vital, knowing who's coming back in and when, knowing who your vulnerable people are, knowing who has childcare issues. So understanding people's personal needs and bringing them back in the workplace in time when it's right for the business, and keep that communication live. Next slide, please. So this is where it gets really exciting. And this is where we're cashing in on that opportunity. What we've seen of those people sat at home and what we're seeing of those people in the workplace showing a different level of attitude, a different level of behavior. We needed to capture that. For 5 years, we've been striving to be employee owned. We've just been missing that opportunity. I visited Gripple, another employee owned business, and I found it's overwhelming what they've done. They have Glide House, which is an amazing concept of benefits that they give to their employees. I quickly realized that it wasn't about shares and that it was about your environment. What's good about working for business? Do you feel like you belong? And Helen will touch on that and the psychology of that pretty soon. So what you see in front of you are our Phoenix levels. This is the concept that we have dragged out of this opportunity. So we've created 5 levels. The first level is the fire. Nobody ever wants to get there. It means mass job losses. It means permanent branch closures. It could be the end of our business if we're not careful. But we know it's there and we need to be mindful of it. Then we have the level 2, which we have described as the ashes. Unfortunately, we did get there. Some of our smaller branches had to close temporarily. A large proportion of our staff went on furlough. The numbers were down. And we're not out of the woods yet. But where there's ash, there's new life. And that's what brings us on to the level 3. It's what we've termed the hatching. And everybody sat at home on furlough understands these levels because not everybody knows how much turnover we do on a daily basis. Not everybody knows how many orders every branch does. But by following a simple level structure, which gives hope to everybody, whether at home or in the workplace, the good things are coming. The level 3 is the hatching, and it shows new life is being found. It's starting to capture all of those things that people did really well in our survival mode. But level 4 is where it gets even more interesting. The level 4 is a phoenix is born. That's when we're saying we are back to how we were before the pandemic. But what's different is we are operating in a whole different guise. People are really acting as corners. How do we know that? Well, because we've captured it. And we have started to implement it and track it and monitor it. And people are feeling really good about it. Because now they know what it looks like. Because we've catalogued it and we've shown them. Level 5 is where the phoenix rises. That's the concept of what we've tried to do for the last 5 years. It's about being profitable, having the business develop beyond whatever we could imagine. But we can do it leaner, more efficiently, more effectively, because we have the right workforce, because everybody's acting as co-owners. Then there's a little secret that'll be divulged. And if any of our employees are listening, I'm going to give it away. But we don't hide anything, do we? So why not? We're going to develop a Team Phoenix. And again, I'm copying off some of our other employee ownership businesses, because why not? We're all share and learn. Team Phoenix will give rise to a lot more benefits to our employees. It will ignite our environment. It will make people want to be there and want to work and have their own business and reap the benefits and reap the rewards. And that's the hope. That's where good things are coming out of all of this. And people seeing a sign of hope and being able to reflect on them levels is where we have really taken the opportunity to the next level. And some of you might be in the same position at home looking for that opportunity. And here it is. That's me for now, Deb.
Thank you so much, Shaun. I think that's the first exclusive we've had on one of our webinars, an exclusive announcement. So that was a fascinating story. I'm sure, like me, there'll be people at home scribbling lots of notes down. But I mean, an overwhelming story of togetherness, very structured approach, as I would have expected from Shawston around that model. But obviously that opportunity that made your face light up at the end as you talked about the Phoenix and Team Phoenix coming out of this as a positive is such a heartwarming story. And I know we're going to hear more about that, lots about that, I know, over the coming years. I'm not going to take any questions yet, Shaun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our second speaker. So I'm absolutely delighted. Somebody who many of you will know is now going to join us, Helen Moreton. Good morning, Helen. Morning. Helen's founder and director of Boombox Consulting, somebody who's been very close to the EO community and the EOA over the last few years. I'm not going to say anything else, Helen. I think you can speak for yourself through your next few minutes, talking us through some of the complementary challenges to some of the environment we've just heard from Shaun. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Shaun. It was really interesting to hear the story. And when I share some of my slides and some of the psychological considerations, you'll see that that story is brought to life through those slides as well. So yes, I'm Helen Moreton. I've been an active part of the EO community for over 20 years. I spent 18 years in John Lewis Partnership in a variety of commercial and independent roles. And my last role there was a non-executive one, working alongside business leaders, advising on how to leverage a culture of employee ownership and working within the democratic channels. I now have my own business, Boombox Consulting, and I'm really pleased that I get to still work with lots of EO businesses and purpose-driven businesses and, you know, chair and coach and train and develop alongside those EO principles. I'm also the chair of the Co-Owner Council for Riverford and the chair of the Board of Trustees for Turley. And I'm going to utilise that experience and that genuine passion for EO alongside my background as a master coach, NLP practitioner and professional member of the National Council of Psychotherapists to help us explore some of those psychological concerns for returning to the workplace. And it's fair to say that your organisations and your people will be at different places with that transition. So if you can share this first slide, please, Ollie. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm sure that some of you are really familiar with this and others maybe not so. But I think it demonstrates really well the kind of place that many of us are in and some of those considerations about how we move forward at such a challenging time of crisis. And Maslow said that in order to move through these psychological levels, you would need to address the needs within one of those levels first. And those needs range from the core needs right through to something like self-actualization, which is around purpose and living your true life. So if we start with the first level there, which is those physiological needs, air, water, food, shelter, as difficult as some of us may have experienced it, seeing people panic buying, we can understand why when we look at that very primal response to survival. I need to feed myself, I need to feed my family. Cortisol, adrenaline will have been rushing through people's bodies, and it will have meant that they wouldn't have been thinking in a logical way. The reason for discussing this now is that you will have people within your workplaces or returning to work that will still be in a state of fight or flight with high adrenaline in their bodies. And it's about recognizing that and being supportive of that, and letting that help you understand your people. The next level is around safety needs. This is very, very pertinent for people returning to the workplace. And people will feel at different stages with this. And I'm going to give you an example from Riverford here. So Riverford as a council, we used to meet monthly. Through this process, we've been meeting weekly. And the councillors have been getting a response from their constituents on 3 key questions. How safe do I feel at work? How happy am I at work? And how well informed am I at this time? And it's the safety one that's driven loads and loads of feedback for us. And what's been great is in a really pacey way, we've been able to address those fears, those needs of people within the organisation, and leadership have been able to respond to that right away and put any of those concerns right. So that's worked really well for us. And if people don't have that need addressed, they won't get up to those other levels. So the next level is around love and belonging. And I think this is a really lovely thing for employee-owned businesses. I do believe that they harness a greater sense of community and family and belonging. And it was great listening to the webinar last week with members from John Lewis Partnership talking about this huge virtual community that they didn't have before, talking about how they were sharing acts of kindness, recognising each other. And also in places like Turley and Riverford, having online quizzes, keeping in touch with furloughed people, keeping that sense of belonging and community. And there's countless studies that show if we feel a sense of community, we have better mental health and better physical health. The next level up is around esteem. So that's how I feel about myself. Am I confident in myself and my abilities? But also, do I feel valued by other people? And it's really easy at a point of crisis to go head down and not looking up at what's happening around us. There's a real gift here in spotting what your people are doing well and recognising that and giving them the praise for that, because that in itself is self-perpetuating. And the final level at the top there is self-actualisation. So I'm here, I'm doing what I should be doing, I'm living life, I'm fulfilling my purpose. And with EO businesses being purpose-driven, many of them, I think there's a great opportunity to harness this and get behind this. And I see this at Riverford, where they're growing fantastic nutritious veg and sharing it with vulnerable communities. And those co-owners feel as though they're living their purpose, which is great. So as you look at this hierarchy, consider for your own organisation, where were you before coronavirus? Where are you now? What are the gaps and what would you need to cement within your organisation to be able to move up to those next levels? So the next slide I'm going to share with you is around psychological safety. So what does it actually mean? So I've given the definition at the bottom there, and this is founded by Amy Edmondson, who's a philosopher. So it's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns or mistakes. I think this is so important at this time of returning people to the workplace. They will be feeling a variety of emotions. Some people will be chomping at the bit, ready to get back. Other people have been cocooned for several weeks in their place at home, feeling safe and secure. And to come out of that is going to be a massive step forward for them. So both views, whether you're chomping at the bit or you're nervous and anxious, are valid. And psychological safety is about hearing that and putting voice to that and recognising those different emotions and responding to that positively. So feedback's really great. I talked about Riverford and how they're generating feedback. So do you have those mechanisms in place in your workplace? Does your leadership really hear that feedback and respond to that in a timely and considered way? And also, does leadership show their own vulnerabilities? A key part of psychological safety is learning from lessons. And I think all of us through this crisis have learned something about ourselves or the way that we live and things that we might want to change. And I read in a Personnel Today study of 1,000 people, that 50% of those people who'd been working at home, who normally wouldn't, said as soon as their bosses could get them back to work, they would scrap the home working. They wouldn't have learned from this time. So of course, not every business can have everyone working at home all the time, but can some of that be learned from? Can some of that be harnessed? Can the views of your people be heard and acted upon? So this is about setting the stage, inviting people to participate, providing that safety net and responding positively. So on the next slide, I've got here some questions that you can take back to your own organisation and really get under the skin of, where is your organisation at, looking at leveraging those principles of employee ownership. And some people might say, is it worth leveraging employee ownership at the moment? Should that be one of our considerations at a point of crisis? And my answer would always be absolutely 100% yes. If employee ownership can be intrinsic, if it can be ingrained in everything you can do, there is real power in that. And having spent 18 years in JLP, I am certain that they have survived world wars, economic depressions, political upheavals because of focusing on being a different type of business. So the top one there, over an overarching purpose and long-term thinking. Does your business have a really strong and compelling purpose that people want to get behind? So if I consider some of the organisations I've loved working for, the partnership would say worthwhile and satisfying employment in a successful business. Turley's would talk about flourishing people and places and communities. And Riverford would talk about being useful and growing fantastic nutritious veg for their communities and their people. All of those purposes are something I want to get behind and I want to contribute to. And it's considering, do you have that kind of purpose in your organisation? Is it explicit enough? Is it something your people want to get behind? Do you make decisions based along that purpose? And can that be part of your recovery plan now, as you imagine what this post-crisis future might look like for your people and your organisation? The next one's around compassionate leadership. And once again, loads of research that shows leaders that could lead with vulnerability and positivity and empathy get much better results from their people and really harness a sense of belonging and trust and loyalty. And I think within an EO business, we should be really good at this. It should be about servant leadership. It should be about everyone contributing to a greater good. It's also worth mentioning at this point that being EO doesn't mean everything's rosy. And there will be difficult conversations that your organisation will be needing to face into potentially. Speaking to an EO member a couple of weeks ago, they've been particularly hard hit at this time. Job losses is really real to them. And they were asking me how, when, if they should have that conversation with their people. And my answer was, treat them with the same honesty and respect that you always would do. And, that is a cornerstone of employee ownership. Okay, be sensitive about how you share that information, but bring people in, treat them with honesty and integrity, and potentially they will be part of that solution. The next point along is around employee voice, engagement and empowerment. And of course, I shared what Riverford have been doing with weekly council meetings. They also have weekly management meetings and weekly vlogs to their co-owners. There's a real push and pull of opinion and feedback, which means that the leadership are wide awake and judicious enough to deal with that at pace. And things don't fester and become an issue. They can be dealt with in the moment. And what we're seeing is co-owners are providing solutions and providing ideas about how to move forward and how to really harness the positives from this opportunity. And the last one to share is around good governance. Does your organisation share power in a really healthy way? So John Lewis Partnership will talk about the governing authorities of Partnership Council, Partnership Board and the Chairman. Okay, all looking at things in a different perspective, but working towards a common goal. And it's the same within Riverford. I work with the board, the chair of the board and the chair of the trustees to make sure that the right stuff is on the agenda. It works really well and we're making sure that we're questioning and challenging appropriately. And so if you try to harness that, you will have much more a culture of fair challenge and question, accountability and learning, rather than a culture of blame. And that's far more positive and far more successful in an approach. So I hope you found those questions helpful, and I hope you can take them back to your organisation. And please let me know how you get on. And if anybody wants to have a conversation to get under the skin of those further, please do drop me a line. I'd be really happy to have a chat. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Helen. That was marvellous. And I'm going to straight away invite Shaun back. So just while Shaun's doing that, Helen, you talked a lot about the psychological return, and I guess one of the questions that I've got immediately for you, just while Shaun's preparing himself, is clearly you hope that you can get everybody to a point of feeling safe to return to work. But we all know, and we've probably all got sort of friends and family members and maybe some work colleagues who really have that heightened level of anxiety right now. And whatever is said, whatever the government tell them, they're still not, for all sorts of reasons, maybe feeling safe. How would you, what's your advice to a leader in a business that is facing that type of challenge? How far can you push it before, you know, you're accused of not caring enough?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, being employee owned doesn't mean it's all in favour of employees. It's about a balance between the needs of the business and the needs of the individuals. And so I would always say, you know, you lead with your people. You do everything you can possibly do for your people. So if they can work at home, if it's just, you know, saying, well, no, we've never really done that, so we don't want to do it, then that, I don't believe that's acceptable. If it's looking at it and saying, well, we can't do it for these reasons, but perhaps we could do this, I think that's the right way of broaching it. And it's when people come back into the workplace that they see that those measures are in place and they are being taken seriously by everyone. And if they're not carried out, they have a voice, they have an opportunity to raise that without any fear of repercussion from leadership or from fellow co-owners. And that's why I love what Rutherford have been doing with giving voice to that every week. And now actually there's hardly any feedback around any concerns of safety. The scores are really high because the co-owners feel listened to and felt like they've been able to appropriately challenge, and leadership have heard it and dealt with it. And they understand that there has to be that balance between what they need, but also you want a business for the future, you want future sustainability, and that takes everyone to be involved. And so by harnessing that, keeping focused on the purpose, the greater good, what you're there to do as an organisation, I think that's a really positive way forward with that.
Shaun, you talked a lot about, in this recovery phase, you put clear focus on some of the legal aspects of this, but you use the analogy of the supermarket safe, which I thought was really clever, because of course that's something we've all got experience of. Can you talk a little bit more about what sounded quite command and control? In fact, the word was the commandments, and then you talked about marshals. Can you talk about how you are managing to communicate that and how you balance that off with what is a very human organisation that puts people first? You know, talk a little bit about that balance between those two approaches.
Yeah, no problem, Deb. So we've had to form a very balanced way of communicating. And I think that the best term, which Helen might be able to relate to, is conditioning. It's human conditioning of how we speak to people, how we communicate, whether that be in a positive or a negative way. And throughout all of this, I think Shawston as a business have been absolutely phenomenal. It's my personal view on it. We have continued to pay everybody in full for as long as we possibly can. Everybody that's been at home have had continuous means of communication and a personal telephone number of people right at the top at any time. And the communications via WhatsApp, we used an app called Clips, and it's standard on any iPhone, any iOS device, and it's free. And the way of communicating through that app is very simple, and it delivers a very quick message. And you can bring it upbeat with music and so on. Now our marketing team took that to a whole new level, and the camaraderie and the positivity that's expelled has been absolutely amazing. But then there comes a time for seriousness, and there comes a time where we are now protecting lives, and we are protecting families, and we're protecting jobs. So the turn from positivity to being very disciplined in a structure of using the term commandments aligns with everything else we've been doing in the background, whether that be a Cobra team or whether that be having bikini alert states, very military. So to continue that theme, it was very important to have the commandments to do two things. One, give people confidence that Shawston are doing the right thing. And two, let people feel safe. And that ties very cleverly to what Helen was saying about people having them level of needs. Because if for 1 minute anybody at home thought that we weren't taking this seriously, then we would be in a very bad place. Now, having the COVID-19 marshals to enforce that does two things. One, they are a corner, and they are speaking to people with respect on their level. This is not the SLT or a manager getting involved. This is their corner, their colleague working with them to advise them they might be doing something wrong. And the COVID-19 marshal, the second point, which is more important than all, carries the employee voice. And that is obviously imperative in an employee ownership culture. So any issues, concerns, or safety fears that they have, they don't need to speak to a manager. They've got one of 20 marshals to speak to at any time to raise any concern. That might be a personal concern, or it might be a concern about somebody else that is perhaps not adhering to the rules. And that can be dealt with very quickly in a respectful way. But we are dealing with life and death with this virus. Very rare can we say that in history, but we are. And if we don't deal with it that way, then people won't have the confidence. And we are giving people that confidence.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's good to hear. I guess I was just trying to draw out the difference between that freedom of employee voice versus the more constrained and legalities of, as you quite rightly say, Shaun, fulfilling those health and safety obligations and the moral obligation of safety. If we look at purpose, Helen, because you talked a lot about purpose, you talked about how important that is. I guess an interesting thing that Shaun talked about was that move into this phoenix-like state that Shawstons are now considering, which possibly wouldn't have even been there before this crisis, because it sounds like you've had this epiphany almost, this realization that the business can be even better than you thought it was before. And I guess I'm wondering, Helen, how does that work in a business sense? Because for many individuals, they'll be expecting to return to the business that they left. You know, so they're going back to what they liked, and they're going back to where they thought they were going to be. And actually what Shaun's described is the possibility, certainly at Shawston, where they've discovered new ways of doing things that make them far more efficient, and they don't want to slip back into the old ways. So I'm just interested to know what your advice would be to any other leader who's listening in on this, thinking that's exactly the sort of opportunity we want to grab, but is it the right time to do it now? Because people are just coming out of the cocoon of, you know, this crisis. Is it the right time to do that? I know what Shaun's answer is going to be, because clearly they're on that track already. But what about, you know, more generally, what would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, so, you know, a really compelling purpose and values, if they're already embedded in your business, fantastic. And then the ability to be able to grow those and harness that further, you know, really great. If, however, you're thinking, we haven't got something that our co-owners will readily get behind at the moment, but we're seeing this opportunity, we're learning lessons, we're thinking about the future sustainability of our business, and we need to do something different, or we need to do something better. I think that's a wonderful message to co-owners. It provides hope. And I would say what you really want to be able to do is harness the power of your people through that. So it's great to share a compelling message, as Shaun has very much done so with this rising of the phoenix, which is brilliant. I think the next step along from that is going to your people. Be part of this. What does that look like to you? What does that mean to you? And so as Shaun has already said, around having commitment cards, reviewing the induction process so people are familiar with what the new might look like, and getting them engaged from that right from the start, letting them be part of, I said before, part of that solution, part of that thinking. So it feels like it's not done to them. It's something they want to get behind, because all of us would want to work for a sustainable business. All of us would want to work for a business that has a clear and compelling vision. So if that is not too late, if that's not in place in your business at the moment, if it's already there, but it needs to be further amplified, this is really the time to do it. If you haven't got something that's compelling, but you're spotting opportunities, get your people involved. You know, set the scene as much as Shaun has done, and let your people really be part of that solution.
We hear lots of talk, don't we, at the moment about the new normal and about build back better. And it seems to me that what you're both saying, and Shaun's clearly demonstrating through the example at Shawston, is that actually this is a perfect time to do that, and employer-owned businesses are perfectly positioned to do that because of that engagement piece. I was talking to the chairman of one of our other large members in Scotland this morning, who was talking about exactly that, how the employee engagement piece has opened up not only the opportunity for them to survive during this period, but also to start thriving because they've been able to think about new things. Can I just take us back to how do you capture the lessons learned? Because again, I think that's something that all businesses, and particularly employer-owned businesses, won't want to lose. Shaun, you talked about, specifically, you talked about more discretional effort, individuals taking on leadership, the efficiencies that were driven out from that, and you described it beautifully as the Shawston soul. So it's almost like it wasn't there before, but you've suddenly discovered it. It was under your very nose, but you've discovered it. Can you talk a little bit more about how specifically you are going to try and embed that as part of a new part of the DNA, I guess is what you're actually saying? How is that practically going to work? Just to give the viewers and the listeners some ideas and some more tips.
Yeah, what I'd say, Deb, firstly, is the Shawston Soul concept isn't new. Again, we've piggybacked off the back of one of our mentors, being Gripple, and Gripple used the Shawston spirit, do they not? And it's highly effective. And they define the Gripple spirit through values. And Shawston will do exactly the same. We define Shawston Soul through a set of values and behaviours. Now, those values and behaviours can only come from examples that have been set by people. And one of the easiest sort of examples I can draw upon is very, very relevant, very hot off the press. This Friday, our IT and phone line system went down, and we all know it was a bank holiday. So, trying to get a third party to come out on a bank holiday by a company who wasn't employee owned was finding it very difficult to send a remote engineer to us on a bank holiday Monday. It would have meant serious disruption to us first thing Tuesday morning and perhaps a large loss in sales. Being employee owned and having people see what Shawston Soul is through examples that they've seen on WhatsApp groups, and Shawston Heroes, who's known, or Shawston Stars that we give a shout out to every week. People are really being conditioned to what that is and what it looks like. So when I picked up the phone to our internal IT chap, he was already in the car on his way down to High Wycombe, and he'd left the barbecue running, under control, hopefully. Obviously, hadn't had a drop to drink, thankfully. But he was there. He drove 200 miles to get there to sort it out. And there wasn't any question of that. And very quickly, we got to see that somebody with Shawston Soul, it defines an EO business over any other business that doesn't perhaps have that culture. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have an EO business to be able to do that. And a lot of businesses listening be thinking, well, a lot of my guys would do that. Great. Well, then you've got a great opportunity to be employee owned, because it just takes it to a whole new level. So to be clear on your answer, the Shawston Soul will be defined in a lot of values. It's defined in the commitment cards, and it's defined in what we will be creating as a catalogue of what good looks like.
So that role modelling piece is really important for you, isn't it? I can tell, and also the internally role modelling good behaviours and showing how to others what that Shawston Soul looks like. But also you've quite openly pinched ideas from other EO businesses, and using the mentor description, I think is what you said. So I guess a lot of businesses might be sat there again thinking, okay, this all sounds really great. We're not quite in this space at the moment. Our return to work is going to be very, structured, careful. We don't know if we're going to survive, which is sadly the case. What could you, either of you, give advice to those types of businesses? Because I'm very aware that, we've just had a beautiful conversation about some really positive aspects, but we know, don't we, that there are lots of businesses facing real challenges. So, have you got any words of wisdom from some of the businesses you deal with, Helen, about how this employee ownership spirit, this, you know, engagement with people, the communications foundations, how could a business leverage that right now in this return to some sort of normality?
Yeah, okay. So what I would say is that it's really normal and natural at a point of crisis and emergency for people to regress. And now we're moving into a place of recovery, which is great. And of course, there'll be some businesses thinking, but what does that look like? And is that even possible? And as I said before, you know, it isn't all EO just rosy because you're employee owned, and you will at times have to speak the uncomfortable truths to your people. And if you don't speak those uncomfortable truths, it will come across as disingenuous and unauthentic, and your people won't have trust in you. So, you know, we think about that trust equation, which is about how, you know, the credibility, the intimacy, so the relationships and the reliability over self-orientation. So this is a great opportunity for leaders to step forward and to share some of those vulnerabilities, maybe personal ones, but also about the business, and be real with people and say, so, you know, we're forging a plan. This is what we think it looks like. So you do want to give hope. You want people to trust you and feel confident, but we want you to be part of the solution. So it's not right to stand up and say, don't worry, everything will be fine, because people will spot that a mile off, and actually it will make them feel worse about the situation. But only in saying, you know, we are in a point of crisis. You know what's happening. We've got some great ideas about what we need to do. Not all of those are going to be easy decisions, but we want you to be on this journey with us, and we want you to be part of the solution. I think that's really empowering, and that is fundamental in employee ownership.
Yeah. Shaun, if I just ask you the same question, and I guess I'm going to make an assumption here that, you know, you're asking a lot of people, aren't you? So your communications, you know, on the one hand has been very supportive, very reassuring. You've both used the word hope about 3 times now, and that's really reassuring, isn't it, for people to have that hope? But is there a level where you also have to ask of people?
Yeah, massively so. We're coming into that phase now. So the hope side of it is great, and we need that. And people also need light at the end of a tunnel. It's human instinct. And we are leveraging off the back of what is a very difficult situation. And it's a very difficult time for Shawston. And we're working all hours, and it's very hard work. So to be under no illusion that it's all rosy at our end. What I would say to other businesses is, yes, it's hard work, but now is the time to strike, because we're seeing businesses diversify. I think it was only yesterday I seen Restaurant Noma, one of the best restaurants in the world, who maybe serve 20-course meals for £500, and now doing £20 burgers out the back window. And, you know, it's a true example of how people are just going a total different direction. I would say to any business that already has a recovery plan, there is a chance you will already have levels and plans at each stage of what you're going to do. It makes complete sense to ask yourselves where you are on the employee ownership journey. How can you weave in just the odd point, the odd skill, the odd level of communication that talks to being employee owned? You may not be ready to power through Phoenix levels, but why not create your own levels to where you are as a business? We're going to use our Phoenix levels to talk about people working in different guise, people. So we talked about the level 3, didn't you, where we're at now, which is the hatching. Well, we tie that into, you know, looking at people working different shift patterns, because the construction industry is now changed. It's open later during the week, and it's now open on Saturdays. So the level 3 will be about talking to people about changing their working hours for us to be able to survive. So we tie in the reality of some really hard work and some difficult conversations with them levels, but it lets us focus and power through. Some very difficult decisions are going to come to our employees over the coming weeks, whether that be on furlough, about holiday entitlement. We're going to put some of the decisions, some of the very big decisions, in their hands for some of the first times ever in Shawston. And we're really hoping that people will make the right decisions for the strength of the business. So it's a test for us all. Me personally, as head of operations, as a senior leadership team member, it's a bigger test than we've ever had. But it's also a time where, if you wanted to change something, now is the best opportunity you've got. It really is. Use the levels that are right for you in your business at this time, and let them work and let them talk to everything you want to change, whatever that might be.
Brilliant. I'm just going to give you both an opportunity to, if you want to say anything as a last sort of thought about what the topic of today really is about, which is returning to some sort of normal. Let's call it the new normal. You know, what would be your one word of wisdom, I guess, for the people who are listening? Helen, I go to you first.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, keep true to those principles of EO. We've seen from the statistics that we have that EO businesses fare really well in any economy, and they can fare really well at a time of crisis. Pull upon those principles, stay true to them, and let your people be part of the solution.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. And Shaun?
Yeah, I think we've seen some fantastic things happen in our country throughout all of this. I'm seeing people cycle and walk past a house that didn't even know existed in my neighborhood. And, you know, it's just one further example of how people are changing the way we do things, and we're really coming together. It's a really difficult time, and the easiest relation I can give to it is the war. I've talked the military talk all the way through this to some extent. You know, we've had some great heroes, and we had the best heroes come out of both the First and the Second World War, which we still celebrate today. And we've all seen the news about some of them chaps doing amazing things. And we will remember the heroes, whether that be in Shawston or any business, and what they've done for us at this time. But the hard work starts during the recovery. After the war, we had to rebuild roads, we had to rebuild houses and infrastructure. But let's not forget, one of the best things that ever came out of the recovery of the Second World War was the NHS. So now is a time to create great things. Now is the time to strike while the iron is hot, and grab that opportunity.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you in conversation. As I try to do when we've had these conversations, I always try and give a bit of a roundup. I'll give you my roundup, but actually I think those two final comments from you two have probably done the job. So what we heard this morning was very much around a modelled approach from Shawston, which is fit for the future, actually. And Shaun made that really important point that we could slip back into needing to model and have a model to manage crisis in the future. So we should definitely learn from what we've experienced over the last few weeks, apply our thinking, maybe think about your own model the next time. If this happens again, what would you do? And Shaun made that offer of sharing his own model with you. We then heard from Helen about a reminder of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Took me back to study times, but how absolutely relevant that is right now. And asking that important question of your business, where were you and where are you now on that hierarchy of needs? And don't forget that, you know, people can't be expected to reach up to that higher purpose if they're still worrying about their physical safety. We've just finished off by thinking about opportunity and looking ahead, and that compelling narrative that Shaun left us with of now is the time for change. And certainly at Shawston's, they've got the Phoenix and they're going to rise, no doubt, and I really look forward to seeing that. But obviously at a very basic level, we must in the next few weeks and months continue to think about the physical safety and the psychological safety of people returning to the workplace, because that's first and foremost our responsibilities, your responsibilities. And I was just struck again in this conversation by something that kept being mentioned and has been mentioned in every one of the previous 9 webinars, which is about communications and honesty and transparency, and how that creates real trust. And thankfully in employer businesses we have that, and that then gives you that foundation to deliver both hard and soft messages, and to expect people to step up to and into new responsibilities. So thank you both of you. It's been absolutely a pleasure to have you both. I'm just now going to say a few things before we finish, because I think probably you all know that this is our 10th webinar in this first season of webinars by the EOA. And actually over this last 10 weeks, we've delivered 10 webinars, and we've engaged with just under 200 member organisations and other organisations, and that's about 800 people who've either sat in on one of these webinars or they've viewed it externally. And that These webinars have been part of a fuller programme that we put in place 10 weeks ago as our response, which includes our COVID-19 hub on the website and our weekly newsletters. But on top of that, we've been receiving emails and phone calls on a daily basis from members, and we want to encourage you to keep doing that. So if you want your finance director connected up with somebody else's finance director to learn from them, or somebody who maybe is involved in the trust, maybe one of your trustee directors needs some advice and support, please drop us an email, give us a call, pop a question on the EO Hub. We are going to be here throughout to support you, to signpost you, to listen. However, what we are about to do now is to just pause. We've come to the end of this 10-week session. We feel that it's time for us to reflect both internally on what we've learned and to prepare ourselves for the next chapter, but also to think externally about what's the opportunity for employee ownership. We very much want employee ownership to figure centrally in the Build Back Better agenda. So the next few weeks, we're just going to be taking a pause, and we're going to be then coming back to you to tell you about the new programme of engagement that we will be delivering. And I'm absolutely delighted, the first highlight in that programme is going to be EO Day on Friday, the 26th of June. So look out next Monday for an announcement on how we're going to encourage you and invite you to be part of that. We thought long and hard about hosting EO Day this year, but we feel it's fallen at exactly the right time, at a time when we are all now moving into this recovery stage, and we do want the opportunity to celebrate what we've all been through as business. So I'd like to thank everybody who's been with us over the last 10 weeks. We've had so many members contribute to these webinars, both as participants, as people asking questions, and I want to thank each and every one of you, because we couldn't have done it without you. And please do keep sharing your stories, your ideas, your thoughts with us. What's really important for us looking ahead is that we continue to deliver what you want from us as our members. So there is going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. Please, if you haven't ever filled it in, just take 5 minutes to do so and tell us what are those 3 topics that we would most like to hear us cover between now and the end of the year. And you'll see the questions in there. So until we meet again, very much look forward to doing that in the future. Have a good few weeks. I hope your return to your workplace is successful. Stay in touch with us. If we can be of any help, just get in touch. Nice to speak to you again.